Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the sponsors for putting this on. This is a really impressive event. It's probably the most impressive meetup I've ever been to speak, and it's also bigger than a lot of the conferences that I've spoken at, so that's pretty cool. So yeah. So who here is using GraphQL or has tried it out? All right. So a lot more than I'm used to seeing. That's really good because this is pretty in-depth into GraphQL, but it's also really good because if you're getting into GraphQL, a lot of the tools and techniques I'm going to talk about are pretty good for beginners, and they're also good for intermediate and advanced people because you can actually take what we're doing and scale it and do a lot of crazy stuff with it. So really the core of what this talk is using pretty much on every demo I'm going to show is React and GraphQL, but it's also really about kind of leveraging managed services, leveraging smart tools, and leveraging things that we have now as developers that we maybe didn't have 10 years ago. So we have all of these really, really interesting things that we can work with that kind of abstract away a lot of the back-end functionality that we used to have to build back in the day. So the main two tools that I'm going to be using, or the main tool really I'm going to be using, is a managed service called AWS AppSync that we built at AWS. But anything that I'm showing can actually be accomplished with any backend that's built in GraphQL. So I'm not really trying to emphasize our stuff here. I just want to kind of emphasize that you can actually do this with any of these tools. Hasura is really good. Prisma, GraphCMS, Apollo is really good if you want to roll your own. These are all managed GraphQL services, similar to AWS AppSync. And one of the main things that we're going to be looking at, and the thing that we're going to be kind of really, I guess, digging into as far as like the implementation details are concerned, is this idea of GraphQL as an API gateway. A lot of times when people think of GraphQL, they think of the resolver level, and the resolver level a lot of times just talks to a database or talks to some type of data source. But in reality, the resolvers are really just functions, and because they're just functions, if you have this GraphQL server and if you have everything running in the proper environment, you can actually do quite a bit with it. And that's really what I'm going to be showing off, really ways that we can abuse these GraphQL resolvers. So this is my talk, Curious Cases of GraphQL. My name is Nader Dabit. You can find me on Twitter, GitHub, Medium, and dev.to at Dabit3. So if you have any pictures, if you have any questions, tweet at me at Dabit3. I'll follow you back. I'm a web and mobile developer. I'm an author. I've written React Native in Action, and I'm writing a book for O'Reilly that's coming out next month called Full Stack Serverless. Also, I'm a podcaster on React Native Radio, GraphQL Patterns, and React Roundup. So I'm going to go over a couple of things that I've built and show you how I built them. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to show you a repo with like 9 different applications that are completely built that you can look at all the code. You can actually deploy some of these apps with like one click. Some of these are mobile apps, so you actually have to download and compile the code, but the web apps you can deploy pretty easily. The first one I'm going to look at is a real-time drawing canvas. So if you were to build something like this and you wanted to make it real time and you wanted to use GraphQL, how would it be done? That's essentially what I'm going to show you real quick. The first thing I wanted to do when I had this idea was build it on the client because I wanted to have some static data, work with that locally, and then after I got that working properly, I was going to then deploy it, build it back in, then try to work in the GraphQL subscriptions. So the library that I went with was React Canvas Draw. React Canvas Draw is really nice. You can actually just import it. You pass in a string as the markdown. As the canvas that you're going to be working with, and then you can actually then just draw on that canvas. And if you don't pass anything, you give a blank canvas. So you can then maybe pass in a drawing that you have on another client and then draw it back. And that's kind of what you might do if you were collaborating with someone else. So this is kind of what that canvas looks like. But this is the data structure. So first, I wanted to model the data and kind of look at what it looked like. And I wanted to change what the implementation looked like that they actually built. So instead of downloading the project, I actually forked it, brought it locally, and made a couple of changes. But essentially, you have 3 parts. One is the width, one is the height for the canvas, and the other is the lines that are painted onto the canvas. So each point is given an X and a Y axis. It's also given a radius and a color. And as you plot multiple points, you basically have a line. And what you can do with this is you can actually draw these back in real time. So if you're drawing and then someone else is looking at a different version, they can actually see the drawing happen. And if someone else actually opens the browser to the same drawing that you're working on, it will actually draw everything back in the same sequence that it was created. And then you can actually have multiple people working on this at the same time because you're going to be basically subscribing to changes in this lines array. So for the GraphQL schema, it's really, really basic because what I ended up doing was just taking that data object and stringifying it and sending it across the wire and storing it in the database. Then on the client, we parse it and then work with it. And then you basically listen for changes, and the changes that I was listening to were updates. So if you open a canvas, you listen for updates on that canvas. When that happens, you do a diff locally. If it's different than what you have, you then draw. That's kind of the gist of it. So I'm going to do a quick demo. I know that's not the proper use case for that. Oh, first of all, yeah. Has anyone ever text messaged Markdown before? Okay, cool. Now you have the opportunity to do that. If we have time at the end of this, I'm going to go through these questions and answer them. I built this today using GraphQL subscriptions with SMS and Markdown. So you can text message Markdown to this number. It should come through in real time here. And at the end of the talk, I'll go back and look at it and answer any questions. Or if I see you at the beers thing later, I'll talk to you. So this is the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh to make sure my subscriptions are working. Whoops, there you go. So you draw whatever, Then we're going to go ahead and open up another window. And then this person is also going to go ahead and draw. And I want to go ahead and take this localhost URL and put it there. And then that gets drawn there. And then now I'm going to draw my last name or something there. Yeah, there. Whoops. Oh, crap. Bug. All right, let's try that again. And then we're going to open another one. This is not production ready. All right, so basically that's the idea. It's pretty simple, though. The implementation ended up being pretty easy. And the idea there was using really just that stringified piece of data, sending it across the wire and not doing anything too crazy with it, because all you're doing is sending it, parsing on the client or whatever. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you is how could you do image recognition in GraphQL. And what I ended up doing for this was using a managed service. So you end up just sending the image reference to a managed service that can do that processing. And there are a bunch of different services out there these days that use machine learning and stuff. At AWS, I use what we have. It's called Rekognition. And what I ended up doing was modeling the data first, and that's pretty simple. All you are going to be using is a reference to the location of the image. So for the GraphQL schema, we ended up using just a string. And for the image data, that's the string. And then for the query, we basically have this operation where we pass in the process image and we pass in the image info, and that returns the image data. And the image data is the return value from that processing software, the Rekognition machine learning service. And that image data is basically an object that just tells you what's in the image. So if you send over an image that has cars in it, you might call a method that looks and tells you that there was 7 cars. But the one that I worked with was one that basically takes pictures of people and does recognition on the people. So it tells you how many people are in the picture, what they're doing, what they look like, and things like that. But this is the process that kind of went into that. We first upload the image to a storage bucket in S3. This could be any type of storage solution that returns some type of image URL. We then send that in GraphQL to a Lambda function. The Lambda function then processes that in the machine learning service, which returns the data back from the Lambda function, and then the return value gets sent back over in GraphQL. And this is the entire code actually for the Lambda function. We just import recognition. We call recognition.detectFaces. There's 40 methods on recognition that you can pass. And then that gives you the data, and then you just return the data in a callback. All right, for the demo, I'm going to need a volunteer for this one. Who wants to volunteer to be recognized? All right, come on. Whoever said I will. I'm glad you look. Okay, yeah, you look a little different than me. You have glasses on. That's good, because we're going to be able to tell the difference between me and you. Jason, Nader. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and toggle the camera. There we go. All right, so we're going to run the query, and we're going to now wait for the response to come back, unless there's some type. Okay, there we go. That took a hot minute. Anyway, so it tells you how many people are there. It tells you what the people look like. So let's go through. So there's two people. There's a 38-year-old and a 35-year-old. I'm the 35-year-old. Okay, you have glasses, so yeah, okay, actually, yeah, you're the 35-year-old, never mind. So the person with the glasses was 35, smiling, we're both smiling, yeah. So that's it. So thank you for doing that. That was about it. And one of us apparently looks angry. Anyway, so you can also like upload a file. So like if I was to upload, I don't know, let's see if I have a image with something on there. Yeah, so this image has like pictures of like 4 people in it. We should be able to detect that there's like 4 people in that. So there we go. All right, so that's that. The next thing I'm going to take a look at is real-time collaborative Markdown. I really like doing things with Markdown because I'm a developer and I love writing Markdown. So I've built a lot of tools that allow people to do cool stuff with Markdown. And what I'm going to show now is a way that you can do something like Google Docs, but with Markdown. And how can you do that with GraphQL? And how can you do it as easy as possible? And what I ended up working with was this library from the open source called React Markdown. And you basically just create a string that is your Markdown. Then you then pass that into a component that renders that Markdown for you. And it's pretty easy. And if you've ever used Gatsby or something like that, you may have seen this type of stuff. And it's basically really easy to work with on the client. And then I modeled the data. And the data is a post. So this post is like something you would collaborate on. And the main piece of information that we're interested in is that Markdown string. And again, that's just a string that we end up sending across the wire. We end up listening to changes on that string. And when that happens, we re-render the client. We also have a client ID because we want to make sure that if we're the one that created the changes, we don't want to listen to those changes. Or if those changes do come down, we discard those changes based on the client ID. And everyone that sends a change has a client ID. That way you can like discard any duplicates on the client. We have a get, we have a list for queries, we have a create and update for mutations, and we have a subscription to listen for deletes and for updates. All right, one more demo. This is actually a live demo, and if anyone wants to try this out, they can go to writewithme.dev. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new post, and this is going to be called Santa Monica, or actually Venice, huh? All right, so we have our Venice post here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this here, and I'm going to go ahead and make some edits, and I'm going to go ahead and maybe write some code. And then maybe I want to go ahead and throw an image in here. Oh yeah, too many ticks there. Oh, there we go. Someone's jumped in. Okay, cool. So we have a collaborator. So yeah, that's basically it. That's about the demo. So anyway, it's dynamic, and you can actually fork this off of my repo and deploy it with one click using some of the tools that we have. So I'm going to let that hang out there for a second. So what if we wanted to build something collaborative with music? So this is going to be the demo that we list. We have some really nice music going on. So the first thing I needed to do was create something that or have something that plays music, because I'm not really that talented at music. Ken Wheeler built something called the Trap Lord 9000, and that's what we're going to be using. And the Trap Lord 9000 is a step sequencer, and you can basically choose different beats that you want to play along a step sequence, and as the sequencer plays, if the beat is highlighted, it'll play. So what if we wanted to take this and have all of us together like create something and then collaborate on it? And we wanted to use GraphQL, of course. So what I first did was looked at the data. And again, just like that initial piece of data we looked at for the first demo that I looked at, it's just a piece of data like an object or with arrays and all that stuff. And what we do is just stringify that, and we use that as the data model. We send that across the wire, store it in the database. We listen to changes on it. And you can look at this array of kicks, for example. If it's a 0, that means it's not playing. If it's a 1, that means it's playing. And if it's a 2, that means it's a triple beat. Next, we create the schema. The schema just has a client ID and a beats string, and then we have a name for the beat box. So that way, if we create a beat box, we can attach a name to it. All the basic operations you might expect on a GraphQL operation: queries, mutations, subscriptions. All right, for the demo, that's a little too far ahead. All right, so we have height beats. And if you want to try this out, you can go to heightbeats.dev. I'm going to go ahead and create a new drum machine. Call this Venice. Whoops. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start playing or start making something. We're going to play it. It's kind of loud. There we go. Someone's jumping in. Whoa! Whoa! All right. Well, I didn't realize we were having such a good sound system in here. Anyway, so we're getting kind of close on time, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this out with my last example. And this is something that I just came up with actually recently. And what if you wanted to start using GraphQL with infrastructure as code? I'm a front-end developer, and I don't know anything about infrastructure as code, or at least I didn't until I started working with cloud technologies about 1.5 years ago. But what's really cool is the tool that I work on is AWS Amplify, and I'm going to show you how you can use Amplify as a front-end developer on the command line to create infrastructure as code, share it, and then deploy it between different people and share projects. So I worked on this conference app for Chain React conference in Portland a few weeks ago, I think it was, and I helped build a chat feature. And if you look here, we have like a discussion on the very right-hand side, and we wanted to have a way for people to talk and interact with the speakers during a talk. So after building that out, I thought that that was a really cool idea, and I wanted to actually build a project to open source it because I go to a lot of conferences, talk to a lot of conference organizers, and everyone always needs a conference app for their conference, but they spend between either they spend 10, 20, 30,000 bucks building the thing, or they spend a bunch of time wasting their time building it, and they only use it for like 2 or 3 days. So what I ended up building was this application here. It's completely themable, and you can download it and deploy the front end and the back end within 15 minutes. And you can theme it within like less than 1 minute. So we have a theme file. You just change out the highlight color, the primary colors, all that stuff, and then your logo. So how could you create infrastructure as code as a front-end developer with Amplify? Well, first of all, if you wanted to, if you're going to be building something with GraphQL, go ahead and model the data that you need because you're going to need that GraphQL schema to work with. For me, I needed a type of talk and a type of comment. I also created a type of report because we had a code of conduct. We wanted to make sure that if someone did something crazy, we could block their device. And we basically built that into the app. And then we had a monitoring dashboard. People could report comments. We could then block them from the monitoring dashboard. We also had authentication. We didn't have authentication, for that app. I built authentication into this app to make sure that people have identity. But you could easily strip that out if you didn't want to have any friction for people at your event. And then to actually build the thing, you could use Amplify, and Amplify is a command line tool. You can initialize a new project by running amplify init. You can add different features like authentication, APIs, and things like that by running amplify add and the name of the feature. And then to deploy it, you run amplify push. After that's deployed, you're left with a amplify folder. The amplify folder has a backend folder within that. You can share that backend folder with anyone, and they can then deploy the exact same infrastructure in their account using amplify init. So it literally takes kind of what containers are and brings them, in my opinion, to like full stack front-end applications and allows developers to actually really share really cool projects. And I've actually already worked with organizers, not 15 conference organizers, but organizers from conferences that we're going to be building this thing in like 15 different conferences. And we only released it maybe like a week ago, and it's really cool. So let's look at a demo, and then we'll be kind of wrapped up with everything. So this is the app here. You can basically look at the schedule, look at your profile, edit your profile. You can sign out, sign in, and sign up. It has all the authentication. You can drill down and look at a talk. You can then discuss a talk. And then you can actually have other people come in and comment on a talk. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how that would look real quick. I'm in the wrong app. Sorry, it might take me 1 second to go ahead and get into the right region for this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a comment, and I'll call this Venice Beach. And hopefully I'm still logged in. There we go. So real time, that's using GraphQL subscriptions while we're on the topic of GraphQL. You literally, again, can clone this, run amplify init, and it'll deploy it. I'm working on a web version. It's using Gatsby. It's using static queries. It's using all of the same stuff, though, other than that on the front end. All right, so really the core of this talk is about combining managed services with GraphQL and then using React on the front end. But of course, if you use any of the stuff that I just showed you, I used Amplify on the client for all this stuff. We have libraries for Vue, Angular, and Ionic as well. And we're looking at maybe possibly getting into Flutter. If you want to look at the code for all of these, plus a total of 9 projects, it's under my GitHub repo, Dabit3/curious cases of GraphQL. And again, I'm Dabit3 on Medium and all these other places. I got images from Unsplash, Jens Johnson, Kareem Mandra, Christian Spies, and Edwin Andrade. So thank them for that, and thank you for listening to my talk.